Hi, folks. My name is Mark Weston. I'm the Communications Chair at Defense of Democracy. Welcome to the Media 101 training. In the next few minutes, what I'm going to do is take you through some of our policies, our tone, our voice, best practices, and media strategies. Basically, anything that relates to outward-facing communication from Defense of Democracy will be covered in this training. So if you're planning to speak in public, if you're about to be interviewed, if you have to debate somebody from the opposition, these will be some tips that can help you get through that and make sure that you maintain the appropriate voice for Defense of Democracy. I will say at the outset that some of the things that I'm going to say here are going to sound controversial and unpleasant. I have many, many years of experience in news media. These things are not my personal opinions. They are based on facts and experience. Ugly though it may be, I'm going to give you the real deal to help you navigate the landscape of media. So let's start right off the top here. Media is ugly. It is a dirty business. It is not what you think it is when you see it on TV. And if you choose to go out and speak to the media or speak in public, even at a school board meeting, on behalf of Defense of Democracy, you're a target. The other side does not play nice. They will play hardball. You will get eaten for lunch if you are not prepared. But don't be afraid of that. It's important to remember the big picture. Defense of Democracy as an organization is bigger than any one of our chapters or any school board or any individual. We have a mission, and your job is to advance it. And you have to advance it by sticking to the organization's talking points and not embellishing them with your own input. It's highly likely that your personal beliefs align very closely with those of the organization, but it is very critical that you do not bring your personal beliefs into this. If you're speaking on behalf of Defense of Democracy, you must stay on our message. I'm going to get to that in just a minute, why that's important. But the main thing to remember is that even a well-meaning comment by you or by another volunteer can and will be taken out of context by our opposition. And we never want to put ourselves in the position of having to say, well, I didn't mean to say it that way. What I really meant was. So that's why it's important to stick to the script. I'm going to say right off the top here, too, we will not prevail every time. There are going to be battles that just are not going to go in our favor. Don't get discouraged, just do your best. But the important thing to remember is don't win the battle, but lose the war in the process. You need to be positive. You need to be focused, you need to be purposeful, and you need to be confident. Anytime you're speaking on behalf of Defense of Democracy, you need to be basically your highest and best self. There are several strategies that we will employ to help get our message out. And the first strategy is this one: stay on message at all times. The first key to any successful public speaking is staying on message, because it takes multiple exposures to new information before that information fully registers in the average person's consciousness. So to get through to an audience, you always need to be consistent and repetitive when presenting your message. If you've ever been familiar with the advertising or the marketing worlds, you might have heard the idea that it takes 7 touches before somebody retains information about your product. What that means, a touch could be a TV commercial, a web banner, an email, a flyer, a video. 7 times people need to be exposed to what it is you're saying before it sticks in your head and they make the connection, oh yeah, those are the people who do that thing. So you and everyone else on your team must have a very clear and very unified understanding of our public posture. Now, this includes not just our mission and the messaging that supports it, but also the language with which that messaging is delivered. The worst public relations disaster that could befall an organization like Defense of Democracy is if our leader has to walk back or clarify or apologize for a statement made by one of the members. It doesn't matter how well-intentioned the statement was or what the context was at the time it was made. The general public doesn't get into context. They don't get into nuance. They basically follow headlines and they follow short sound bites, and that is what shapes their opinions. It's a sad reality, but it's true. They do not read 6 paragraphs down in the newspaper to find the gray areas. All they do is they read your tweet, or whatever they call them now. They will hear a soundbite on the news, and that will shape it. So one bad soundbite, one bad tweet, one bad post on social media can do serious reputational damage. This is why there's literally no margin for error in messaging. Now, obviously, we're not going to be perfect all the time, and I don't want you to worry and I don't want you to beat yourself up. We're doing the best we can at all times, but always be very vigilant, because if our message gets undercut, even inadvertently, by one of our volunteers going off script, our credibility goes immediately to zero in the public eye. Our opposition will exploit any missteps we make. They'll do it every chance they get, they'll do it in every situation, and they'll do it forever. Even if you made a bad, comment a year ago, they're going to keep bringing it up and throwing it in your face just when you think it's dead and gone, because that's how dirty they play. So to succeed in promoting defensive democracy, staying on message is an absolute must, no matter what the circumstances may be in the moment. The next media strategy is maintain your tone. The tone you use to present your message is very important. Any good message can be greatly diminished or even fail outright if it's presented in a poor tone. It's very often not what someone says, but the way in which they say it that provokes a response. So what does tone mean? Tone can mean anything, from the pitch of your voice to your choice of vocabulary to the physical demeanor, the body language you display. But even with attention to these details, your tone is always going to trigger some segment of your audience for intangible reasons. I'll give you some examples. These are from real life. Somebody had a mean boss, and their voice sounded the same as yours, the same pitch. So they hear you, it reminds them of their mean boss, they don't like you. Or your hair is the same style and color as their nasty mother-in-law. They see you, they see your hairstyle, reminds them of their nasty mother-in-law, they don't like you. It's irrational, yes. It's intangible, yes. But these are real factors in the world of communications. Now, all that said, there's obviously no way to address every potential scenario. But you should be aware that these types of triggers exist. So if you're going to be in public on behalf of defensive democracy, do your best to find an appropriate tone that appeals to the majority of your target audience, and try to maintain it as best you can when you're in public. Media strategy 3, be passionate, not angry. At some point, you will very likely find yourself in a situation where you may be tempted to unleash anger towards your opponents. I'm going to tell you right now, don't do it. Don't do it. This is not to say that you shouldn't express strong emotion. It's only that you need to filter your words. Believe me, I sympathize. I've talked to many volunteers and many parents who have been dealing with, our opposition groups who say, I'm ready to just let those people have it. I'm so sick of what they do at school board meetings. I get it. Don't be angry. Be passionate. Be firm. Advancing defensive democracy's larger mission is more important than responding to ad hominem attacks or winning a skirmish on social media. Nobody's opinion was ever changed by a comment thread on Facebook. Don't even waste your time. The other thing is your opponents want you to react angrily because then they can justify their argument that, quote, see, you're no better than we are. You're calling us a hate group? Well, you're a hate group. So don't be impulsive and reactive. If you stay calm, you deprive them of their claim to any moral high ground that they think they might have. Another thing to think about in the larger context of media, you may very well believe that because Defensive Democracy is a positive organization, it's a noble cause, we're on the right side of history, therefore any audience you speak to will automatically respect your words. They have to see that you're the right one and the other people are wrong. You know something? When you're in the media world, none of that matters. When a camera's pointing at you, when a microphone's pointing at you, you are a product. To the media, you are just selling like toothpaste or Taco Bell. You're just something else to be consumed. They care less about your message than they do about eyeballs and ratings. So the only way to be sure your message lands in the public ear in the way that you intend it is to deliver it precisely and consistently every single time. Keep your composure. Don't give your opponent anything that can potentially be used as ammunition against you now or in the future. Media strategy number 4 is watch out for gotchas. You should never find yourself in a public situation without full command of the facts and a ready response to any question or allegation that gets thrown at you. If you're going out to speak on behalf of Defense of Democracy, do your homework. Know what you're speaking about. Know what all of the facts and figures and statistics around your cause are. The key to reducing the risk of being caught by a gotcha question is anticipation and imagination. You need to envision the types of things that your opponent, let's say you're at a school board and you're going to be debating, or a reporter, let's say you're doing a podcast or a video. You need to envision what they might ask, and you need to have a calm and measured and rational response ready for them. Every successful political candidate does this. When a presidential candidate is about to go on stage and debate with its opposition, he or she will lock themselves in a room, and their staff will play reporters, they'll play the opponent, they'll play all of the peripheral people who might have anything to do with asking questions, and they will dig up dirt and they will hammer the candidate with every last failure, every spin, every negative thing they can come up with. The purpose of this is so the candidate can hear it in advance and anticipate those things and create a calm and measured and purposeful and rational response so that they come off composed and they don't get rattled under pressure. So if you know you're about to speak in a public forum, get together in advance with some of your team members and have them play the role of your opponent or play the role of a reporter. Try to anticipate questions. Go off the charts. It doesn't matter how crazy. People ask crazy things. Practice your responses for all of those things, and practice not only what you're going to say, but how you're going to say it. Your language, your tone, your posture, everything that is going to be seen publicly. If you ever find yourself in a situation where you don't know what to say, which I guarantee you is going to happen, just remain quiet and defer your answer. It is a perfectly acceptable response to say, I don't have that information right now. I'll get back to you on that. The only caveat to that is as soon as your interview, debate, whatever is over, you go right out, you figure out what it was you wanted to say, and you make it very public that you're making that statement and that's the answer to the question. Because it's a dodge for a lot of political candidates. They'll say, oh, I'll get back to you on that, and they never do. Defense of Democracy, we need to get back to them. Get back to them quickly, get back to them on the record. But don't be afraid to say, I don't know. It's safer to say, I don't know, or I'll get back to you on that, than it is to try and freelance something and stumble over your words and stutter and stammer and not know and do more damage than good. Media strategy number 5. Stay in the moment and be aware of your surroundings. There have been numerous instances, and I'm sure you've seen them, where a public figure makes an inappropriate comment that is caught on a hot microphone or a live camera because they were unaware they were being recorded. Now, this very often will occur in downtime, like immediately before or after the event that the cameras and the microphones are there to record, or it'll be in a commercial break of a podcast or a TV show. And it can also happen when someone believes they are alone in the company of sympathetic friends or colleagues and shares their true feelings out loud without considering repercussions or consequences. Be very careful. Don't get caught. Whenever you're in a public setting, you treat every camera like it's on and pointing at you, and every microphone like it's on and recording your voice. Even if they're across the room, pointing in the other direction, even if the lights are off, and even if you are told, oh, don't worry, everything is shut down. And I'm going to repeat that because it's important. Even if you are told the equipment is turned off, remain in the moment. Stay aware. Do not say anything that could be used against you. Media strategy number 6, control the narrative. Now, in the news media circles, you hear a lot of talk about the narrative. And what a narrative means is not necessarily the truth of a story. The narrative is the version of that story that an individual or an organization would like to advance about themselves for their own benefit, even if it's not entirely truthful. The news cycle moves very quickly, 24/7, fresh, churn, churn, churn. And people, as I mentioned earlier, think about things superficially. They listen to sound bites, they listen to headlines, they don't really dig down. So, because of this constant demand for fresh news and because of the demand for clicks and eyeballs and ratings, which is really what the media cares about more than actual content, news organizations will tend to very quickly reduce the substance of any issue down to a set of easily digestible narratives. And so the public debate and coverage that follows an issue is rarely about the substance of the issue itself, but more often about the competing narratives around the issue. In other words, something happens, and the people over here say, well, this is what we think happened. And the people over there say, no, this is what happened. And instead of actually delving into what happened, they'll have these people on as guests on a talk show, and they'll say, well, what do you think of this? What do you think that? And they're debating their competing narratives. They're not solving the problem. So this is part of the reason why we need to control the narrative about defensive democracy. The media landscape also has what I like to call the, quote, out there phenomenon. And what that means is this: if there are multiple pieces of content that all advance a specific narrative in the public forum, and they are out there, whether they're on the internet or on YouTube or on TV or TikTok or wherever, if they're out there and they remain there long enough, that content gains weight and it gains credibility, even if it's false and unwarranted. The longer a narrative is out there, the stronger impression that it leaves on the average person that that narrative must be taken as seriously as any other viewpoint. And also, because the news cycle churns so quickly, stories fall out of the headlines pretty quick, maybe a few days, maybe a week, depending on the story. This out there phenomenon means that whichever side gets the biggest and fastest narrative out in front of an issue usually wins the debate and usually influences the public perception of the issue, because whatever that prevailing public perception is when the story falls out of the headlines, days or weeks later, it becomes the historical truth. The last thing people remember, whether it was right or wrong, becomes their truth. And the more time passes, the harder it becomes for that truth to be challenged. Now, your opponents know this too, and they realize that in the court of public opinion, arguments are not won with subtle shadings. They dumb it down. They are won with simple language that helps them advance their agenda. Doesn't matter if you have the facts on your side. Doesn't matter if you have the stronger argument. Doesn't matter if you brought the receipts. If your opponent has the more compelling narrative, they will prevail in the media and in the public eye. Now, the important thing to say here is we may not be able to control the narrative others advance about defensive democracy, but we can lessen the opponent's ability to spin our words against us. And the way we do it is by telling the truth, the absolute truth, 100% of the time. Media strategy number 7, address your audience, not your opponent, and be proactive, not reactive. In any situation where you're addressing an audience, whether it's in media or whether it's in person, it's in a room or on a camera, there's going to be 25% of the people who are going to disagree with you or even hate you, no matter what you say or do. Even if you have the facts at your command, even if you're absolutely right about everything, they still won't want to believe you. Ignore them because you're not going to change them. There's going to be another 25% of the people who are going to love you and agree with you no matter what you say or do. Ignore them too, because that's just preaching to the choir. The people that we need to reach are the 50% in the middle. These are reasonable people. They're not bad human beings. They are good, decent human being people who are just either too busy to keep up with all the details of an issue, unaware of the details of an issue, or they've been misinformed. In most of the United States, there are large media conglomerates that control, the airwaves. There's parts of this country where there's only 1 or 2 channels to choose from, and that's the news people get, and that's the news people believe. And it may not be the news that you agree with, but it's maybe partisan, but it's what they've got. And again, they're not bad people. They just don't know any better. They're not going to dig down and read blogs and figure things out. They see a guy on TV in a suit telling them stuff, and they think, he's on TV, it must be true. They are reachable and they are capable of thinking for themselves. So we need to present defensive democracy as the sane path forward. If your opponents want to talk about us being groomers or that books are pornography or they want to make aggressive threats, let them do that. Don't respond to them. Just be a steady, calm, and rational alternative to that person by your words and by your actions. And frankly, to your audience, it may not even matter what you say as much as that you create a positive impression and don't come off as crazy. If you're in an actual debate with the opposition, don't address them directly. Talk to the audience. If you're on TV, talk to the camera. If you're on podcast, talk to the microphone. Don't respond to the other person. Don't give their arguments credence by trying to rebut them, even if you can, and even if you have all the facts on your side. Treat your opposition like a distraction that's not worthy of your time. Speak directly to your audience instead and advance your message. This is the point of being proactive. You need to be proactive to get your message across, not reactive to whatever noise your opponent is making. I'm just going to let this sit here for a second so you can read it. See, there's a lot of bad information on the internet, and it's masquerading as fact. In addition to outright distortion and misinformation, politicians and pundits and commentators regularly employ techniques like lying with statistics or cherry-picking convenient half-truths to suit their needs. Now, I will say this happens on all points on the ideological and political spectrum, from the extreme left all the way to the extreme right. But the point is this: you might see something in the media that you agree with, and it's attributed to a person you respect. But just because you're predisposed to agree with the idea or like the person doesn't mean that what you're seeing is true. So look at the slide I'm showing you right now. So before you repost or requote or retweet or otherwise quote anything in public, research it. And if you cannot verify it, don't post it. This may be the single most important thing you can help Defense of Democracy do, maintaining its credibility. Because imagine our opposition posting a headline that says, "Defense of Democracy spreads lies," just because one of our volunteers inadvertently posted something that turned out later to be false, or not even false, but just slightly misleading. So before you share anything that is not your own original content, fact check it. And that doesn't just mean Google it or use Wikipedia. Crowdsourced media can be inaccurate too. You need to find several legitimate, reliable sources and verify it independently. If you can't verify it, don't put it out there on behalf of Defense of Democracy. Media strategy number 8, and this is one that I hit on a little bit before, so I want to dig back into it now and explain why this is important. Tell the whole truth all the time. In every public statement, whether in print or in person, tell the whole truth all the time. If you bend the facts slightly, or you spin the figures slightly, or you cut off the bottom half of the bar graph that doesn't accrue to our benefit because you believe it will help advance the Defense of Democracy mission, it will come back to bite us. However, if everything you say, everything you write, everything you post is 100% true, you have nothing to fear. Your opponents will have no ammunition to use against you. There will also be no need on the part of Defense of Democracy to have internal coordination. Oh my God, we need to have a call, we need to have a meeting to get everyone on the same page, get our stories straight. If you're telling the whole truth all the time, there's no story to get straight. Now, the other thing that's important about this is you need to acknowledge the flaws. Human beings are not perfect. Policies are not perfect. We may be supporting a policy or, praising a human being who's doing something good. And you have to say, I admit that 20% of this policy is problematic and I don't necessarily agree with it. Or, yes, I know this person has had problems in the past with their private life, but nonetheless, the preponderance of weight, the greater good, we support this. If you own all of those limitations and you acknowledge them, you're taking away your opponent's ability to say, well, what about the fact that this policy says X? Put that out there and then make it clear that it's wrong to you too, but that Overall, you support the policy, you support the person. The perfect cannot be the enemy of the good. And the final media strategy, number 9, make them feel it. I have a Maya Angelou quote here that I always refer to. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Successful messaging is about much more than just the words and the tone you deliver them in. It's about more than just having the facts at your command. The most memorable and the most effective public speakers are ones who not only make you think about what they're saying, but they make you feel their words. Now, this is an intangible skill, and it's very hard. Not everyone who speaks in public will master it. It takes lots of time, lots of practice, lots of mistakes. But it starts with your own belief in your cause and in yourself. Your commitment to defense of democracy when you speak in public on behalf of us has to be so unshakable that your conviction and your passion come through in your voice, in your body language, in your mannerisms, and it's felt by anyone who hears you speak. You literally cannot fake this. You really have to believe in what you're saying, and you have to let that belief infuse all of your words and actions. Ain't gonna be easy, takes practice. We're all gonna make mistakes. We're not gonna win every battle. Don't beat yourself up. We're doing a good thing here. We're just gonna keep getting better at it. Hang in there, and thank you all for your support of Defense of Democracy. This is my information right here. I am always available via email. If you are preparing for something where you need some advice, if you're crafting messaging for a specific event, if you want to make a flyer, if you need talking points to go into a school board meeting or a debate, please send me an email. I am happy to communicate with you. Thanks again.